Have you ever wanted to play medieval dodgeball?
I've never even considered it. The closest that I could think of is that Mayan thing where you throw the ball through the hoop that's up on the wall and then they cut off everybody's heads.
They cut off people. What is that, Mayan Quidditch? I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't remember what it's called, but you throw a ball through a hoop, but the hoop is sideways and it's really high up on a wall.
Oh, is that the thing where they kick people's heads around on the ground like it's soccer, but with a head?
Yeah, and if you lose, you become the head.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, I mean, this is not necessarily like that. It's more like dodgeball. Hey guys, this is Brax.
And this is Moriarty.
And they've actually called it Dodge Brawl. This is Striker's Edge, and I think dodgeball is a really good way to describe how it works. There are a collection of characters to pick from, 8 of them, and each of them has their own special skills, and they use different weapons, so there is a bit of variety there. I personally had the most fun playing with a knight because I love throwing spears at my opponents, and that's what this game is all about, throwing things at your opponent. Just like dodgeball, you are set up on 2 separate sides of a river on every map that you play on, and you can dodge, which is great because it's like dodgeball. You can dodge with the space key. You have a special that you can use with shift, and other than that, it's just about managing your stamina and your health and trying to take cover and to make sure that you hit your opponent more than they hit you.
Obviously, this will have multiplayer.
Yes, it does have multiplayer. It even has local multiplayer, which for me is the biggest selling point that they have right now because I was able to play 1 online match, but other than that, I tried 2 other times, and after about 2 minutes or 3 minutes, I gave up because the matchmaking seemed to be taking too long. I'm impatient. I'm pretty confident if you waited long enough, you'd get a match because I did get one. It's just after that, it was taking forever. So what I decided to do was just go play through the campaign.
So as with a lot of these indie games, the multiplayer is not perhaps as filled with people as we might like, but this seems like a cool game, so maybe that'll change with time. One of the things that I did see about this that I think is pretty neat, and it even lends into a little bit of competitive nature, especially with the local play, is that it has 2v2.
Yes, it does have 2v2, and while I wasn't able to get into a 2v2 match because of the same reasons that I just mentioned, I was able to experience a little 2v2 action with some AIs in the campaign mode, and it was super fun. I can only imagine playing it with friends, having 2 friends play 2 other friends, and the local multiplayer would be an absolute blast. And I have seen people that have been playing this that are already saying, I can't wait for ranked to be a thing, and I think they are absolutely 100% going to have a ranked leaderboard and ladders, and people can't wait for that because people do get competitive about this, and I can certainly see it being a competitive game because even though each character is a little different, there isn't much that changes in terms of the controls. It's actually really balanced. The only thing that will change is your special, and the way that a special works is that you just hold down left click, which throws things. You hold it down until it charges up and then you use it, and perhaps this time the ninja star I throw might have poison on it, or my spear is actually like a lightning bolt, things like that. But that is the only difference that I can really tell, other than different things like speed and stuff do matter, but it's really balanced, and it's not like each character has an advantage over the other, and for that reason I think it will do well in competitive.
To a point, I'm not so worried about a specific character having an unblockable or something like that, because we've seen this in fighting games for a long time. There's no real big problem with having an unbalanced character as long as it is balanced against other characters. That's really the key thing. For example, there are characters in Blaze Blue who, if you perfect, are essentially unbeatable. However, the skill cap on getting there means that you are a world-class player. And if you're a world-class player, you're probably not going to be beaten at any other character either. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that as long as the skill cap is fair as well. This seems like a fighting game to me, only it's a fighting game that you are always on the left or always on the right. I don't know if you switch sides if you're on the other team and you're playing multiplayer, but you're always on one side and you just never move from there, and otherwise you're just kind of moving up and down and choosing your abilities. It feels sort of like a distilled fighting game.
That's fair. I think it is a bit distilled, but it's also really addictive, to me at least. I had a lot of fun playing it. And I will say this, the campaigns for each of the characters are only about probably 10, maybe 15 minutes apiece. But there's 8 campaigns, so that's probably 2 hours worth of content that you'll get outside of the multiplayer. But even just playing the campaigns, I kept wanting to play another campaign. And I played the first 3 in my first sit down without even thinking about it because I was just enjoying it. Even though it is distilled, there's something about it that is beautifully simplistic. It's something that feels kind of retro in a lot of ways. And for me, I've always preferred fighting games to not try to do too much because, as you said, having that skill cap there is reason enough to keep coming back and keep playing. And like Street Fighter and some of my favorite fighting games of all time haven't always been about doing the coolest stuff. Like Mortal Kombat XL has lots of different abilities and it's really neat, and I like the way they did all of that, but sometimes it felt like too much. I think this one takes a step back. They watered it down a bit to basically focus on the basics and say, hey, this is really about a player and another player really just throwing stuff at each other and making sure that you time everything perfectly and that you are really in tune with the movement and how everything works in this game.
And you know what? I'm okay with that. I actually think that one of the best fighting games that was ever made, because it is such a distillation and it really comes down to you have to play perfectly, is Dropkick. It's a not serious game. Like, it doesn't take itself seriously, and no one should take it seriously, but it is a perfect distillation of what a fighting game should be. And when I look at these things, I think of them very much like a fighting game in the terms of like Evo or playing it on a big stage. And is it the type of thing where you're going to watch it and go, that was a cheap shot. He shouldn't have won that match, right? When you go to one of these events and you see somebody who is world class and they're playing and they get that kill and you're like, he didn't deserve that. This was unfair. He should never have won, right? As long as that doesn't happen, I think you're okay. And Dropkick and this are those type of games where they're highly distilled and they're all fair enough that you feel like if you won, you earned it. And if you lost, you earned it.
I certainly think that is the case with this game as well. If there was one thing that I could see, that I could envision myself watching a competitive match and thinking, oh, that was kind of cheap, would be some of the things that are scattered throughout the map, like logs on certain levels, are destructible. And if certain players could learn exactly how many shots it takes to destroy that log with this player and maybe take advantage of that, because peeking is sort of a thing here as well, whether you use the rocks or the logs, whatever, on each map to basically take cover. I could possibly see people like really using that to their advantage, but at the same time, if you mastered that skill, then again, it's really about skill and the fact that, hey, I practice using cover and knowing how many shots it takes to destroy the cover more than you did. You need to practice more and understand that part of the game a bit better. So even then, I wouldn't necessarily call it a cheap shot. I just think that's really one of those skill level things that could be a part of the game that would actually create a divide between great players and just okay players.
And you know, I think that's perfectly okay. I really do. That doesn't bother me at all. I'm all right with a game being difficult as long as it's not unfair. I'm okay with a game being hard to learn. I mean, this is why we play PUBG. It's why we play CSGO. It's why we play these kind of games where it's all about your player skill, right? I mean, like, that's what it's all about, is how good you are as a player. The game doesn't get better. You don't unlock a better character like in Overwatch. You don't unlock or pay for or get a loot box and give you a better gun like in any of the Call of Duties or the Battlefields, where when you go online, if you have a better gun, you win. That doesn't happen in a fighting game typically. You don't see them locking the best character behind a $10 DLC and then everybody has to buy that and anybody who has it automatically wins. You don't see that so much. So when you get better, you are better at the game. That is fair to me, and that is what a competitive game should be. It's one of the problems I have with a lot of these games that decide, okay, we're going to add in this competitive mode, but then they ruin it because if you don't have this specific meta, or you're not using this character, or you're not doing exactly this, you cannot possibly win. You can't do it. It's impossible because of how they built the game. So I'm okay with a fighting game style where, yes, there is one who maybe is a little bit easier for beginners, but there's ones who's more powerful if you're the best and special abilities, and maybe there's a guy who randomly shows up and he's got, you know, the worst character in the world and ascends to the top of the leaderboards. I'm all right with all of that. What I would like to see, and I think that we might have the context to do something like this, is I would like to see a fighting game personality try this game and tell us what they think. And I think we know some people in the EVO world who might be able to jump onto a stream and try this game out.
I think it would be worth them trying out for sure. It isn't exactly like most modern fighting games. I will go ahead and say that right now. But like I said earlier, I can't really put it any better. It is beautifully simplistic to me. The only thing that I wish this game had more of is characters. There are only 8, and I think that's enough to actually be competitive and get on there and spend a lot of hours perfecting whichever one of those characters that you're going to be best with. But just another 4, I think, would be a perfect number for this game. I was a little disappointed in the lack of characters, but I will say that at least the 8 that they have are different. One of them is a spellcaster, for example. Another one is a ninja. Another one's a barbarian. And some of them throw things. Some of them shoot arrows. Some of them throw spells. So even though it's always about projectiles in some way, each of them does react a little differently and they have different speeds and stuff. I just kind of think that in the future it would be great if there were more characters. If this game ever gets a sequel, if there's ever any add-on content or something like that.
I understand. I think that's really kind of one of those things where it's like, if you have too many, you get the Overwatch problem where you have no idea what you're supposed to do as a beginner, and as a pro there is one choice, right? Like, there is only one healer in Overwatch.
Yeah.
There is only one tank in Overwatch. And when you have that kind of a problem where you're saying, okay, well, if you're not using Mercy, you're a hindrance to the game. If you're not playing as Orisa as a tank, if you're not doing these things, you are actively harming your team. Because with regards to healing, there's no healer but Mercy. With regards to tanking, there is no tank but Orisa. And that kind of leads to a position where if you're not playing specifically to the meta, you are hurting your teammates. In this, if you're on a 2v2, I mean, you're 50% of the team, but I don't necessarily need to have 16 different players where something isn't getting the attention it needs to. I feel like 8 characters is actually pretty good, especially for a first outing. And if this does become the type of thing where people do like to play it semi-competitively, or perhaps competitively, then those characters can get more attention than if you had 25 characters.
That's totally fair. Another thing that will help me wanting more characters, even though there is 8, is the 2v2s, because then you have different combinations. Like, I can imagine right now, if people were running a 2 ninja team, it's going to be absolute chaos for the other team because they throw so much more quickly than the other characters. So 2 ninjas, it would be like shoo, 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 constantly. And there are different, combinations you could run. Like, if you ran 2 knights, you could use both of them to deflect shots, because the knights are the only ones that have that ability, from what I can tell, to actually deflect, not only block, but shoot them back at your opponent. Imagine 2 knights doing that constantly, just shooting things back at the other team. So different combos and different players figuring out, these 2 characters are going to work together well would be super interesting to see in a competitive environment to me.
Absolutely. I am excited to see this, and I really do think that what we need to do here on Crime War is we need to get this into a stream with somebody from EVO who can sit down and say, here's what I do and don't like about it. I'm really interested to hear that personally. Like, even if no one else is interested, I'd really like to know what a professional fighting game person would think of this title. How much does it cost?
This is a $15 title. I will go ahead and say now that I think it is absolutely worth that. I think that's a fair price, especially because they included local multiplayer. Without the local, I might be a little more hesitant, but because you can actually get on here with your friends and just, mess around and not have to play competitively all the time, I think there's a lot of fun to be had right there. And even though the campaign in its entirety, if you do all 8 of the campaigns, is probably a 2-hour experience, that's really just a way to get your feet wet. This is all about the multiplayer, and I think you'll get a lot of time out of it if you have friends that play it, and also if you are the type of person that loves fighting games and really gets competitive about it. You're going to spend a lot of time probably trying to climb the leaderboards.
That sounds perfectly fair to me, too. I think $15 is a good price for a fighting game. I really do. And this is a fighting game. Regardless, it's a fighting game. So I am absolutely okay with $15.
So that is Striker's Edge, guys. I like it. Moriarty seems to like it. It's a really neat little fighting game. And as he said, I would love to hear a more not necessarily professional, but someone that really gets into fighting games, someone that knows a lot about them. I would love to hear their opinion on this, because I think there's something here that I can't quite put into words about the competitive nature and what really makes a fighting game fun. So I hope we can get that done. I can't wait to hear what they say. And if you like it, like it. If you don't like it, don't like it. But if you did like it, go ahead and watch another one right up there in the corner. And as always,
We'll see you on the next one.